All right. Hi, YouTube, and welcome back, Niko. How's it doing? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Excited to get into this. Episode 2, season 1.
Yeah, we're back. We made it past the pilot episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So those who are watching this for the first time, a little bit of recap. A few weeks ago, Niko and I sat down for the first episode of what we're calling Coaching in Public. Niko is a founder of a product called Juttu, which is like a cancel flow optimization product to help SaaS type companies easily integrate and improve their cancel flow to reduce churn, improve retention, stop the leaky bucket essentially. In the last session, we went through sort of things like where does Niko see the company going, value proposition, customer profile, talk through the customer experience. We also touched on go-to-market a little bit, and we sort of ended off talking about this sort of one of the major hurdles right now that Niko is facing was that time from sort of the time to value was feeling too long. So we ended the session with sort of a push to improve the time to value, get people to that first sort of confetti moment, as it's called, so that they can understand the value of the product or start to see the value of the product and maybe sort of get other people on boarded. So I think that's like a good place to pick up. Niko, what do you think?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So how have things been going over the last few weeks since we last spoke? What have you been up to? Did you make any progress on this confetti moment? What's been going on?
Yeah, let's start with the confetti moment, and I can move backwards. So that was really like a lot of clarity we got there to the last time already, where it was like, in theory, value prop is here. It will save people money because we will save some customers from leaving and get more insights on why they're leaving. But to get to that point, they actually need to connect their payment provider. That is Stripe or Paddle for us right now. And they need to integrate the SDK into their own code, which is just like 11 lines, but it still requires some front-end development. And that is still a hurdle. Now, we can do a better job of explaining the promise on the other side of those integrations, so it is easier to motivate yourself to do so. You still have to get your tech team to do it. But the other thing that we discussed last time was, hey, can we not show something before that integration happens? Can we make something valuable happen before that happens? And since the last time we talked, so this is not deployed yet, but like maybe I can even share my screen. But the short version is, we thought, okay, if we don't have the SDK wrapped around, which is the code part, right? We can still do the payment provider connection, because all that is an OAuth connection. Like, connect your payment provider, check. You click a few buttons. Non-technical. Now we build a feature that pulls historic data over the last 9 months right now, 12 months right now, of the subscriptions you've had, of the churn data you have. And we identified the key issues that Stripe and Paddle have, like in the way they surface churn-related data. Turns out those are kind of easy to find, because there's actually quite minimal churn-specific charts and visualizations in some of those like product dashboards. And so we pull the data via API, and then we can basically, before you integrate anything, already show you your status quo, basically, of like, how is your churn looking? How are the cancel reasons that, if you have them activated within Stripe, for example, are looking over time? And so that's kind of the quick value moment, confetti moment we've been working on. It's not yet released. We're testing it, especially because there's a churn agent involved. So basically is this easy to share? Give me a second.
I think so.
Screen. Yeah. So this is like my test account. So like doesn't have full data, but just, you will get the picture. Like we're all doing this in public, right? So churn dashboard, numbers like net revenue retention, gross revenue retention, MRR, churned MRR this month. So that's why it's 0. It's the first, and I haven't updated like new test subscriptions. And then over here, you have like new versus churned MRR, right? So this is an idea to visualize kind of what your growth versus your churn is costing you, right? So in this case, this month, we had like $9 in churn and new MRR 18, right? So visualizing churn versus new acquisitions. And then on the right-hand side, it's like, what's my MR, like whatever, like you can ask questions here. And in this test account, we have November, $18 in December. Okay. So this is obviously pretty basic, but it has like 18 tools, I think now, of getting like the latest subscriptions, trends of churn reasons, trends of like, so the idea is that instead of us bombarding you with 18 visualizations, you can kind of chat with your churn data. So the idea is time to value. Okay. You create a Juttu account, you click Connect Payment Provider, you get this dashboard plus the agent, and you get to ask questions about your churn right away. The idea is that this provides value for you to understand churn. That's one thing that we've heard a lot from customers, is that actually they don't have time or tools to even think about it and contextualize it. And the second one, we see the opportunity here to highlight like, hey, if you improve your cancel flow, you can collect better reasons of why people churn, and you can actually save some of this red MRR here, right? So you can kind of reduce cancellations, reduce churn volume. So yeah, that's the fast move to Confetti moment. Testing it, writing some evals to make sure the agent actually is useful and doesn't hallucinate. And then hopefully by next week, we can ship it to first customers.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see what the customers make of this, because I think this is like a huge... it's a huge win, I think, for the user as well, not just for the company. Because I think when we were speaking last time, it was pretty clear that the major barrier was going to be like not just like getting the resources to integrate, but also convincing people. We were talking a little bit on like how awareness of the problem is low, and that people sort of focus very high on acquisition and activation, but less on retention, especially for sort of startup stage SaaS companies. And I think this will sort of like, using Stripe, well, you get on a call with someone, you may as well try. It gives you a lot of flexibility to experiment with things like, do we do this as like a free thing? Do we do it for like, is a trial that you can it gives you a lot of flexibility to start experimenting with like that initial onboarding to get people like to reduce the time to value, so they actually understand like, oh, okay, here's how I can do it. And this solution to me like seems like an easy way for someone to understand like the impact that churn is having. So it will contextualize what you're doing very quickly, rather than having like, a dozen sales calls, which is what often, particularly when you have integrations, I think you often end up with people going back and forth on the sales conversations pretty often. Oh, but what about this? What about that?
Right. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Even though it's like fairly small, this would allow them to contextualize that problem pretty quickly. All right, so we talked a little bit about this now. What are you hoping to see from this rollout? Like, what's the what is the hope? Yeah, what are you hoping to see from this?
So yeah, last time we quickly mentioned on, I have pretty high conviction that the business model is sound of what the core offering, right? Meaning that it is a cancel flow that, if integrated, saves you some set of revenue. And because there's the direct connection to MRR, there's a way to have like a decent and fair pricing that feels like a win-win to our customers. And then the second element of a business, I guess, is stickiness. So because it is an integration, and we've heard from customers and potential customers actually like, hey, if I would introduce this, I would never want to touch this again. So that's rare that like a customer tells you that in your face. So I believe in the stickiness, and I believe in the monetization. Now, the thing that is missing is the virality, is the word of mouth, is the like curiosity, or the quick time to value. Basically, can I just try something? So the counter side of the coin of like stickiness is that it's like hard to integrate, like relative to like a lovable, like you open an app and you just type something and woo, it's done. So basically providing some level of functionality that has like a certain wow effect, something that is easy shareable, that's easily graspable, and then also easily tryable, right? So these would be the things. So I could see like quite a good quick launch video that highlights like how you can go from no insights around churn to like your questions answered within 60 seconds, because all you need to do is like connect your Stripe. It will sync your past data. You can start chatting with your data. You get some visualizations free. Why not do that, right? So basically lowering the barrier to entry. And obviously we could see like kind of what questions people also have with the agent. So it would be interesting to understand like what churn problems or what questions they have around their churn. So that's one part. And then the other part for existing customers as well, potential, just the internal stuff of like, we understand churn a bit better, and that gives us good motivation to, let's say, go to developers and say, hey, we should really work on this because XYZ. Instead of us trying to pass on the arguments to our customers that then pass it on to their PMs or pass it on to their tech team, that they kind of can arm themselves with with the arguments themselves of like, hey, there's huge potential here. This is a third of our net new revenue, right? Like is churn, like we should probably get to focus on that, right?
Yeah. I think giving people that number is like a pretty massive win. You mentioned free there, giving it away for free. What's the cost associated to you if someone uses this? Like, what's the cost to what sort of cost would it be?
Yeah.
Do you have a rough idea of that?
So we have like throttling and limits set in place. So like if this would go viral, like we could cost control. In short, a singular call is not that expensive. It's like a couple cents. Obviously, if there's like if there's heavy usage, then obviously there could be like quite a lot of tokens attached to this. But what we're doing is we're providing pretty tight-knit tooling. So basically, we're just allowing the agent to do like a specific set of subqueries, and the agent can just connect these queries in different ways. And so actually, it's not able to like do 18 things in a loop in the background. So I think cost is quite controlled. I would say per user, per session, we could like 10 cents or something like that should probably be doing it with the model we're using right now. Obviously, we could upgrade to like the newest model and pay more. And if the evals show that our agent doesn't provide value otherwise, then we should. But from what I gather, most agents that are just rolled out, like don't use like the Claude Opus 5 for thinking, like that you use like N-1 models that actually have faster response time. So financially, I think would be fine, except for if we're going super viral. And actually, that would be nice. There's a natural throttle because you have to connect your payment provider first. So, like it's not that it can go viral in the state that everybody just clicks around and types stuff. And so we assume that there's a limit to the amount of people who are willing to connect their Stripe before using our tokens, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's good that the cost is controlled. What I was going to say is that it might be worth considering like something of like an initial payment to begin with, because it'll allow you to test the value proposition more thoroughly. And then what I would do is I would just give people free access to when you're doing the outreach and sales. So just integrate a coupon code and say, hey, I'm just going to give you 100% off here. And like, just to give it a try. I think like one of the things I typically advise people against is giving away their thing for free, because it just creates this sort of like, it devalues the product.
That's true.
So you want them to feel like they're getting something of value. What that price is, I would just put it at the monthly, like a monthly cost or a base cost. Starts at like $9.99 or something like that. That's just a finger in the air type thing. But that gives you like a stronger indication. Often when people are building startups or early stage products, they forget that the money question is like that's the ultimate validation. If someone's willing to give you money, then you actually have like a strong indicator that there is a business here. If you have hundreds of users that are willing to use a product for free, that's a more mature thing to be doing, because you actually then have an understanding of how to switch those to people from you acquire their emails, then you have things to activate them and to onboard to get them onto paid subscriptions. It's a common thing that people are like, oh, well, I'll do a free trial or I'll just do a freemium product. And that's a really difficult business model to make work, because tuning the point in which the product becomes valuable enough to pay for, super hard. Yeah, and often you just end up with a bunch of free users that never want to pay for your product. Like, I think the most notable example of this was Duolingo. They had like a really excellent freemium product like years and years ago. And then when they eventually turned on monetization for that, everyone was like, they've ruined it. There's a lot of anger around that. Whereas if they just put in some degree of monetization to begin with, they would never have had those users. Maybe that's what they wouldn't have grown as quickly if that was the case. But I think when you're in this mode of like trying to figure out, do we have fit? Is this a product that people are willing to pay for? Most PMs, most of the CEOs that you're like heads of products that you're speaking to, a $10 expense or $20 expense, like it's nothing. They wouldn't even think about it. Like their SaaS bills if you're in a scale up, your SaaS bill is going to be like, $5 to $10 a month if you're lucky. So they're not going to even think about chugging it. And it might be a barrier, but that's also a good indicator of people.
Right, the motivation there.
If people are landing on your homepage, going in and like saying, oh, this sounds interesting, and then they get to the payment page and they bounce, then you're like, oh, okay, the price is wrong, it's too expensive.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think at least making extremely clear that this is a very, if free, it's very limited, meaning that you reduce the barrier to connect and say, hey, now you get some value, you get your dashboard and you get the churn agent and you get 5 prompts, right? And you get then shown like, hey, that's it. Basically, you got the idea here. So you don't have to just watch a demo video or be convinced in a sales call, but we can convince you showing in the product, but then make it very tight, because that's true. I mean, especially getting insights on churn data and payment data is not something that you will do willy-nilly, and something where people don't get that there is money involved, right? Like Chart Mogul, for example, is like a product that's completely based on visualizing, helping you understand payment data, because the payment provider themselves don't do it as well as they should. And obviously they charge for their product, right? So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's like a funny, fuzzy line for us right now. It's just it's an experiment where this is only an acquisition tool, meaning that this wasn't intended to be like part of the product scope that we sell. But now that we're trying it, we're like, well, this could be actually really useful. So let's validate like that it is useful, and then let's make sure that we monetize it like this, so we don't devalue the product. That's a very good point. I took that down.
Yeah. Like it's just easily done. I think we get excited, like when we're building products, we get excited about people using it. And that can often create, like, it's a great sign if someone's using your product, like even if they're using it for free. But the difference between a hobby and a business is money, right? Once people are willing to like put down cash, that shows like a high intent prospect. And if you can start getting those cold, or start getting them through like simple intros, like, hey, yeah, we're doing this, go check it out. And it's like, $10 or $20 or whatever, euros, just to try for 30 days. And it gives you like a much stronger signal that there's like, they're willing to buy. And you can also track like if people are bouncing on the homepage or the payment page, or when they get into the product. So you start getting better signals from the actual product itself as well. And that's actually like maybe I can share and get back to our board here, and I can.
Yes, a board.
Share button not working. There we go. So let's see. Often we're trying to like, if we've got our funnel like so, the one we discussed here was like homepage, sign up, payment, and onboarding the product. Often we sort of like haphazardly dip between those, jump between these, trying to figure out like what the problem is. The ideal thing is to like get this to like start understanding like, okay, if I put 1,000 people in here, how many people are actually going to come out the bottom here? Like to actually get to that point, start tracking that and understanding like where things are, because that means you then actually have some degree of predictability, and you can start identifying where the choke points are in your business, right? So I would imagine right now you have another funnel sort of like earlier than this, like actually getting people to this homepage. But I think getting your mind into a place where you're like, okay, I know that if 1,000 people hit the landing page, like, let's just do order of magnitude, 100 people are going to sign up, 10 people are going to pay, 1 person is going to go through the onboarding. Then you know that, okay, well, I just need to figure out how to get 100,000 people to get my first 100 customers in. But then you also know that like, oh, okay, so we actually have like a pretty major drop off at the sign up stage. If I can get this to 300 people, then that could change that. Just that change would get it to 30 to every 1,000 users to 3 people on going through the onboarding. So it makes like it makes you much more targeted in where your focus goes. And when you skip steps in that funnel, what you end up doing is you create the risk that you then add this back in later, and you're like, oh no, crap, that kills the entire flow. And it just goes like 0, and it just flatlines everything. So you're almost better off just giving people like a way to like sign up and then skip over that, for example, but make sure that they're aware of it, that there's a step in the journey, just because it allows you to have a better understanding of the choke points as quickly as possible.
That makes sense. Yeah, we have a funnel before that. That's for sure. And I think one of the key challenges right now as well is that the sample size is so small that we tend to heavily interpret like this one person did this thing, they're not progressing and onboarding, which is all the data we have. So we have to work with it. But just maybe as something that I've learned over the last weeks is that, especially in B2B, where the likelihood, like you don't need that many customers, right? Like that's the positive. The negative is that if you're just starting to acquire customers, it's very hard not to overinterpret like individual behavior as like making these numbers work. So what I'm focused on is to increase the numbers here to a point where there is, so both those steps, actually, I haven't drawn them out like this. So I should do that. And then the second part is to increase the numbers to a point where you can rely on them to some degree, because it can be like both positive and negatively skewed. Like this one customer really likes you and they just move through it swiftly and your numbers double, or they don't, and they have like a end of year tax problem, whatever, right? And they stall and it has zilch to do with your product or with your onboarding. So that's kind of, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, that is the funnel, and not just because I've been thinking about the funnel before a lot, and that this is like discrete steps, right? It's not just signups to customers. There's actually stuff that happens in between there.
You said a couple of interesting things there. So you talked a little bit about the sort of challenge with like volume, I think, for your distribution. But one of the things I want to touch on is you said you don't need many customers. I wonder if you have a number of customers that you are targeting. I know we talked about 15 previously, but what's actually like a volume of customers? Have you considered a volume of customers that would like take you to a monthly recurring revenue that you would be like satisfied with in the short term?
Yeah. So in the short term, we can, like, to make it super simple, with 200 customers, we can finance this business in a self-serving way. Now, if you look at our pricing page and stuff, like, and you do your own math, you will think like, hey, do they live like in, I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, what's a very cheap country, like, but the reality is like, we believe you can run this pretty lean. This doesn't need to be $1 billion company. This needs to solve a particular problem and save customers revenue. And then actually there's maybe a point where you can over innovate on stuff like this. The AI first cancel flow is a real thing, but the question is like, will we have to iterate for 5 years to make it? Like, we will see, but that will be the point where we can say we can keep this running, and we can be there for our users. If we have less than 200 customers, and timeline for this, I don't know, let's say end of 26. Okay. If we don't have, 200 customers, it will be very hard to justify that. Now, we're not talking external capital or anything, right? Like, they would obviously have to see growth numbers that are probably well exceeding that. But we have the element, obviously, that we have different pricing for different sized companies, as we're relating the what we charge to the amount of just cancellations that they have. So there will be a massive question of how big are the companies that we're able to acquire within these 200. But just to say a simple number, that would be the number.
Okay. What are you expecting the average revenue per user a month to be?
It's, to be honest, it's a pretty dynamic field. We are looking at competitors. Obviously, there's not many that do what we do. Right now, we're significantly cheaper than them, just to make sure that we avoid the hurdle of like, competitive pricing is the reason why we go with the incumbent, right? So we're aggressive in pricing, not because we want to be, rather because we think, okay, let's just take that hurdle away, right? Like, so what I'm saying is I would love to increase pricing if there's no like overall pressure to reduce pricing in the whole industry. Right now, I would assume that we could go with an average of 150 for simple math, dollars a month.
Okay, that gives us a good target. So that's about, ends up being like a 30K monthly recurring revenue. That's a good target to establish. Nice. It's good to get that down, just to actually put words to like, this is actually what we need to do and like when we need to do it. So what's stopping you at the minute, do you think, from like getting these first customers now? And like we talked about distribution and that sort of there just a moment ago. Is that the major issue now, or is there something else that's sort of like getting in your way towards getting these first paying customers so that you can scale towards this first 200?
Yeah. It is distribution for sure. Obviously, early stage startup was always messy, so the amount of problems I could list here are endless. But if I had to keep it simple, it's this is a self-funded endeavor. So we have to balance funding our runway versus building the product. We are like heavily committed to this product because we believe that it's super important to build trust, be secure, all these things as we handle payment data, right? So this is not like a hacky side project where we spend 10 hours a week and we hope like somebody buys it. So in that mix of things, the things that the pillars, the skills that we do not come with as the two co-founders here naturally is sales and growth.
Okay.
I'm an engineer, very technical, did some product work. We have customer success and UX research background with Pauline, my co-founder. And, we've built expertises here and there. I've sold 6 figures worth of coaching gigs per year for years over LinkedIn, basically, with doing content. So I could say like, oh, I know how to do, but that's not the same as selling a B2B SaaS. And that is not a repeatable playbook that I have years of experience with. So what I'm saying is the distribution side, while there's like some elements of we know what to do, that's not our core skill set. Same as just B2B sales, right? So there's the things we've been practicing and trying over the last 4 months now, which is pitching and selling one-to-one. So that's cold outreach, pitching, selling, pitching at conferences, at networking events, etc. So that's the one-on-one aspect. And I think that's gotten a lot better, like I stutter a lot less. And now the second part really is going to one-to-many, from one-to-one to one-to-many as well. I know that a lot of business just sell with cold outreach, but it's just not our vibe to just do that. Getting some warmer leads, people being curious about what we do, that's the second part. And that's content and engaging with the people that are in the same space and interesting. So that's the distribution side. So we have some idea of what to do, but we haven't executed yet to the point where we see those results that would get us to our goal.
Okay. So summarize that real quick. Distribution is sort of the big sticking point right now. Like that feels like the next hurdle to start overcoming. Runway is like the focus on runway is present in your mind, and balancing that, building with distribution and then keeping the runway secure. And then also like a sort of lack of developed sales skills in this particular area is hurting you a little bit. So let's dig a little bit into the distribution side of things. Do you want to briefly tell us how you are handling your distribution today? Like how are you getting new leads in? Is it mostly warm? You mentioned like networking events and conferences and LinkedIn. Yeah. Like what's going on there, like and what sort of volume are you doing?
Okay, so the short version is it fluctuates a lot from week to week. So I'll not pretend that we have this like dialed to the nth degree, but we have 2 things basically going on. One is just straight up cold outreach of pretty qualified, enriched leads on LinkedIn. Can show you the sequence, can show you the enrichment, all this kind of stuff. We can talk about it. The second part is through some kind of intro. So that is friends organizing conferences, people knowing other founders, and me just being there, us just being there and saying, hey, if they have a churn problem, would love to talk and see if we can help. So those are the 2 ways. The warm intros are pretty unpredictable because you would think, oh, wow, like you make a push, you ask a bunch of people, you get a bunch of warm intros. It turns out like, no, they don't. And then like 6 months later, they intro you to somebody. So like it's almost, I feel like the content as well would be playing out a reminder to the people we already know that they still should intro us, right? Like that they shouldn't forget about us. So that's pretty unpredictable. And on the cold outreach side, it's more predictable. So what we are getting is roughly on LinkedIn, right? It's roughly from the amount of people we put in the campaign to the people who like engage with our message, accept the connection request and engage with our message. We roughly get a 10%, 14% in that range. Rate. So
call?
No, to engage with the message. So accept connection request and like reply to message.
Okay. 10 to 50. So from warm outreach or cold outreach, you tap response.
To response.
The response rate is 10 to 15%.
Right. Change different we changed parameters, different campaigns, but that's the range we've been in.
Okay.
And then from that we have like,
what sort of volume, sorry, were you doing on that? Daily, weekly?
Yeah. So we tried to hit the connection request kind of upper bounds, right? I think Dripify and other tools, Tableau, suggest like 25, 30 a day max, and then for 5 days a week. So I don't know, that give us like 150 maybe a week of outreach. So with that, we could say maybe we get between 10 and 15 people actually responding a week. Of those, it's hard to track LinkedIn DMs for the numbers, to be honest. Like we've tracked this religiously for a month, and then we fell off because it's like 2 inboxes, it's all over the place. Like It's really painful to spend like hours tracking the response rates.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I know there's tools for it, but to be honest, this whole GTM stack thing is like, everything's so crazy expensive and so cumbersome to use.
Yep. Just use Excel.
So you're far away from your mic.
Oh, sorry.
But
just use Excel is the recommendation. You don't need to do it religiously, but like do 1 week of the month where you track.
All right.
Where like, okay, I think that typically you should be like, when you're building a business, the advice that I resonate most strongly with is that you should break your days into sort of 3 sections, right? So you have like one where you're promoting the business. So you're doing outreach, you're doing marketing, one where you're building the business, and one where you're executing. And you should do that every day. That's the objective. If you can sort of like break it into these 3 different, some people will do that 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours. Other people will do like 3, 3, 3. But I think like those are the 3 activities that you need to be doing daily in order to move the needle on your business. And in that sort of promotion phase, I would say every time you send a message, say you track the message that's been sent, and then you track the response rate. And the key at this stage, this is a really hard one for people to get their head around, is the volume. You're automating this at the moment. A tip for Dripify: don't automate the connection requests, automate profile views. Because profile views have higher limits. So for anyone who's watching, Dripify is a LinkedIn automation tool for cold outreach. Basically, it allows you to connect with people on, you set up a list. It's a really useful tool for people who are active on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend checking it out. But if you do profile views instead of just connection requests, first of all, you don't get as many connection requests piling up. So you're less likely to get flagged by LinkedIn, apparently. If you trigger profile views instead, and people who view you back and then connect with them, I would test that and see if your response rates go up, because someone views your profile, that they're active, and you can get away with about 75 profile views per day. I think is what Dripify's recommendation is, versus like, as you said, like maybe like 20 connection requests a day. So basically, as long as you have LinkedIn Premium, you can see everyone who's viewed your profile. I think LinkedIn Premium is like $20 a month.
Yeah.
You just check in, and everyone who is viewing your profile, you send them a connection request. Once they accept the connection request, then you drop them that first message. And I would test that to see, because that will allow you to do just that change will allow you to do more than double or like 2.5 times your volume.
Yes. Yeah.
So like you'd be talking like 375, and that would give you 25 to 37 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that like, it's funny, like this will be buried in like minute 15 of this episode. And I'm not sure many people will see it, like see this, but no joke, this makes like a real difference. I mean, maybe I can even add some things that I've learned. I didn't know this one, and I will use it, and this will make a real difference. So that's cool. The thing just to as well, like fulfill the chain to the left and the right. So this volume part, like we are now painfully aware of, because we've tried concierge, like do things that don't scale, So we did like individual outreach, one-to-one, to people who we researched their company prior, et cetera, and the response rates like didn't differ significantly from the automated one. So while you would like to be in a world where it matters a lot, at least on LinkedIn, like what matters is that you have like a trustworthy profile, then you don't spam them with like crazy, that kind of thing. But if you can't get to the volume, and so if you can't get to the volume, you're just going to be frustrated that you had like lovely conversations with people who are nice that do not ever want to use your product or buy it. So for us, it's actually been the biggest challenge to get used to that mindset shift, what you just described. So now, actually, that was something that I only finished to fix yesterday. The biggest step was actually to get even to the list. So the 25 limit, I just wanted to just to finish that. We didn't even get to that on a regular week, like the 150 limit. That's what I mean. The reason why is we could have put any list of leads in there, but they're pretty unqualified. Like you go to LinkedIn Sales Nav, really mediocre tool. Wow. You go to this LinkedIn Sales Nav, but you try to filter, right? And you go on company size, you go on industry, and 75-80% of people we write are not in self-service subscription businesses. So no matter how sexy our cold outreach chain is, they will never buy. They will never be able to use our product. So actually that was a challenge before. Happy to dive into that in case that's interesting. And on the other side, response rates to calls to demo, like to trying out the product. I would say maybe like another 10% roughly, right? So I feel like when we had the sequence running, we had at least two, I know we had at least 2 to 4 demos a week. So it could be a 20% clip here, but I would say like somewhere in between there.
I mean, 2 to 4, if you're getting 10 to 15.
Oh yeah, that's more. That's like a 40%, like 20 to 40%.
To 40%.
Yeah.
So maybe even a little bit higher, but so like 2 to 4 calls. And again, like, you start putting that, if you increase that volume,
there will be more there.
It's like suddenly you get more than double. It's like 5 to 10 people, right? But that just by itself is like a huge shift in the business. I think that this is one of the things that people don't understand about, or at least like the early stage product, or really running any business. It is really about doing like unreasonable volume. Most people are not willing to do 100 DMs a week or 250 DMs a week to qualified customers. They're just, because it's too much work. But that is the sort of like, if you're doing like founder-led marketing and cold outreach and trying to connect with people, like that is the sort of the volume is the key. And then after that, like getting into different like techniques. Like, are you doing direct response marketing where you're just like, connect, hey, I do this, book a call with me? Or are you doing more of the sort of buddy approach where you're actually trying to sell through networking? I'm like, you can get into all that, but the first step is the volume, and figuring out how to do more of that. And yeah, like, so like something that then there's different ways, you can do, if you're doing it organically, you post content. I know you post pretty regularly, but you do content, and then you use the engagement to start selecting people, and then the content becomes a way to like re-engage people as well, because if you're connecting to people like in a DMs, then you have this opportunity to like reactivate them if they're actually connected to you. So you have like multiple chances to sort of restart that conversation if they start engaging your content. It's why content's so important.
It's actually even for the ones that we have like an LOI with basically, and they haven't integrated the product fully yet. I actually have gotten like a ping from some customers because they saw me on LinkedIn and they're like, oh, damn, true, there was something, right? So it's like almost like for the whole pipeline of like existing customers, we do feature updates and maybe they see something and they like our product more. People that haven't fully integrated with us yet, there maybe it is a reminder, potential customers that so it is so valuable to play this one-to-many card parallel to the one-on-one, right?
Yeah. I mean, the founder-led marketing, I think, is currently the biggest trend in SaaS.
Yeah.
Like for acquisition. there's like an explosion of like people doing like short form content, podcasts, of them promoting themselves on LinkedIn, all of these things in order to grow businesses, webinars, free trainings, all of these things, tons of email marketing. It's just the playbook has become a lot more complicated, and it's all driven by the founder because it just cuts through better. If it's one of the founders, it also allows you to do it at a sort of smaller scale than if you have like a marketing team, because then you need to have like a good brand, and whereas with founder-led marketing, you can be the brand. But yeah, I think a takeaway of this section of the discussion is if I was to quickly diagnose like what you need to focus on is how to pump that volume. And it would be interesting to get your take on like other than like this change from like the automation, how else do you think that you could increase the volume of outreach that you your co-founder are doing? And then I think one other thing that we can talk about before in this conversation is which of you is going to be responsible for it.
Right.
Because I think given that there's two of you, you need to start. You need to make sure that you sort of decide like you're both responsible for selling, you're both responsible for scaling the company, but who's driving the
right.
founder-led marketing? Because realistically, it won't be both of you going forward.
No, it makes sense. We decided on my personal brand being the one we were going to put forward, and different reasoning. I've done this for longer. I have a bigger following already, as well as just skill set differences. So I'm really bad at operationalizing this. So I'm really good at spontaneously like pumping out stuff. I'm really bad at being disciplined about it. So setting up the systems and basically doing the head of growth while I'm like the face. So we obviously can share inboxes. We can do this kind of stuff. So I don't have to do the work just because I'm the face, but we're going to use my personal brand for it as the driver.
Okay. I mean, that makes total sense. I think, if you've already got like a bigger audience, then why not? I would project out a little bit just to make sure that you're happy to do that going forward, because it will mean like being, to make it beyond volume, consistency is the next biggest thing. So those and I've learned this the hard way. Many of the founders that I've spoken to over the years have learned this the hard way. Doing this with your content, it just means that your like growth is constantly like dropping down, and like your engagement and people are going cold, versus like if you just consistently show up, it just goes up and up and up and up and up. Maybe it's unfair to show that it's just a line. It's probably more like this, but showing up consistently, just eventually it just completely outstrips the thing, because it compounds on itself versus all of these like small restarts where you lose all your momentum and people forget about you. And like it's such a consistency, such a powerful thing with marketing. And also like when you are consistent, it creates a sort of snowball effect where you just where you get used to doing more and more of it, because you get better and better at minimizing the current tasks, versus if you're constantly trying to squeeze in like a block of marketing here, then a block of marketing here, and a block, like you're always fighting with yourself and you're always restarting. You're always sort of getting a little bit, you're never really growing the skill set that quickly.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's what I learned. Luckily, there was some part of that I learned even before starting the SaaS, right? Being like a product, like doing the coaching gig and having to find customers there. The only reason why I was able to get this off the ground was because I kind of stayed consistent. But now I have to mature in the sense that I wasn't doing anything else. I was either doing LinkedIn content in order to find customers, or I was serving a customer and I prepared enough pipeline of content and stuff like that so I could continue while I was engaged. Now with a product, there's lots more to do. And so now I realize that like my intuitive way of doing it is not cutting it. And so scheduling content in advance, having like some pillars, having some systems, like we don't want to over-engineer this, but I think that's really the maturing process of like, it's not people make it seem like they're winging this on the side. I can talk to a bunch of people who are doing funnel-led marketing well, and I can tell you none of them are winging it. And So showing up like with that level of intensity and seriousness is the thing that makes the difference. And so that's kind of what we're spending time on right now as well, right? Like is getting those systems in place. So both on the cold outreach side, that was a much more of a manual process. So now we have an automation running that pre-qualifies the companies, which is major for us because, well, that's the biggest issue. We had calls with people who are like, yeah, we don't have a subscription service, or like, we don't have I love what you're doing and stuff. And the second part is on the funnel-led marketing side, that this is actually consistent also in the message, not just in the posting schedule.
Yeah. I mean, if you could do, I'm guessing you're using something like some sort of make.com automation or something like that. If you're qualifying people, like that's a really powerful step, because you can also like plug that into like LinkedIn and get people qualified. Like it's pre-qualifying people is a huge step. Like when I first started doing outreach for my business, like what would it be, 3 years ago, I would just speak to anyone who gave me the time of day, and I was like burning like 10 hours with just like a week with just networking calls with people who were just curious to chat with me. Pretty painful.
I've been there. It feels so cool the first 5, and then like week 6, you're like, what am I doing? Like, people are nice. I'm nice. We're not getting anywhere. Like, I'm not helping this person. They're not helping me.
Yeah, I think just being less charitable with your time is like a sign of maturity in this process. Like, it's very easy to allow emotion to feel like action. Like, just because I'm speaking to people, it means that I'm doing something. But actually, like, the measure is like, am I speaking to people who are ready to buy or capable of buying or able to refer me to people or able to support my growth? If not, it's a networking call, and like those are fine, but just make sure that you're not mixing those up with like the feeling of building your business.
Right. That's very good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy to mix these two up.
It is like, I've had people like where I go for like, they're like, oh, I've had like 3 lunches this week. And I'm like, cool. Did you talk business with anyone? And they're like, no. I'm like, were any of them your target audience? And they're like, no. It's like, all right. So that's why you don't have any clients. Like, or that's why you don't have any customers. And it's a harsh truth, but like, if you're not having those conversations with people that are like, like qualified, you're not getting real feedback. Yeah. All right. On this distribution thing, so funnel-led marketing, like if time is an issue, like have you considered any alternatives? Like have you considered advertising? Have you considered VA or any other alternatives?
So to be honest, so far, it seemed like the bottleneck was us giving it the time, not per se us not having the time. So to justify this, and I'm saying like justify because it might not be true, but we had a bunch of pre-sold things to our first customers that we haven't had built yet. And so we need to come up with UX and product in order to deliver. Now we're at a point where we, for example, we're like, yeah, let's go pedal integration. Well, we didn't have a pedal integration. Got to build the pedal integration if you already sold the pedal integration, right? So build the pedal integration, tested it and everything. Now we're at a point where I would say there's incremental product improvement needed. There's bug fixing needed. There is all of this stuff. But the core value proposition is there and the core product is there. And now actually any incremental work on the product is very hard to justify if it is not bug fixing or immediately like solving an existing customer's problem. And so now there is time and space to do these things right. So for now, the challenge was that we didn't give it the time, and now we're giving it the time. So we're really talking like last week here, we recorded like 4 or 5 videos already, edited 5, 6 text posts. So on the content production side, we should be good. We're building up basically a backlog there. And then we'll have an engagement list of people in relevant like industries, relevant audiences where we show up actively in the comments section every day. So these are the things I already have SOPs for, and I already did in the past. And so we're basically just reactivating some of those playbooks, hopefully on like a higher quality standard than when I did it just by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a good place to go. And then to sort of get into the habit. And then I would just say like, yeah, trying to build that like, okay, this is a daily activity now or a 5-day-a-week activity. I would say as well, you'll probably be tempted to go multi-channel quite quickly. Not until you feel like you really like have cracked something. The reason is that I see so often like people are like, well, I tried LinkedIn and I didn't get anything, and then I tried email and it didn't work, and then I tried YouTube and it didn't work, and they're just like not they're not doing enough to like break through anywhere. They end up looking more like a square than a triangle. This is what the importance of focus is. Which of these shapes is going to help you break through a market. Like when you have to break through something, I think this is like focus is key. After that, you can increase you can go multi-channel.
Surface area.
They increase the surface area. I think that increasing the surface area of your product might be smart after you've done a little bit of like checking after you've checked the market a little bit and got a little bit more feedback. I would, talking about like you up here, we talked about your timeline for like end of 2026. Well, then you need to break down like what is like a good sign for Q1 to see if we're on track. Like how many customers do you think that might be? And then you can break that down into like month, week, and start reverse engineering that funnel. So understanding like, okay, if I'm saying that we need 20 customers in Q1, if our success rate on the call is, let's say, I'm going to be fairly, like conservative here, but the success rate for the calls is probably pretty low. It usually is early on. The volume of calls you have there has to be huge, right? Even if it's 10%, you still only have that would be one customer every 5 weeks, right?
Yep.
At the current rates. So you need to get like a good handle on this pretty quickly to understand like, are we on track? And if not, like what do we need to do in order to fill that pipeline and get that going? Have you thought much about this focus now for Q1? Like what sort of volume, what sort of result you are going into?
Yeah, pretty close to 20.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just from the 200, like I'm just trying to keep it simple, stupid. That was basically what we were thinking.
200 paid or free?
Well, it paid.
Okay, 20 paid. Oh, sorry, 20 paid or free. Sorry,
20 paid. Yeah.
20 paid customers. Yeah, I think getting one of the things I'd work into just make sure that you're working in this sort of like response rates. Do it once a week or once a month, even if it's very time consuming. And just every time you send a message, just write down message sent. Every time you get a response, write down how many responses. Every time you get a call, every time you get a proposal sent and a sign up, and you'll just get those rates, and it'll just make it really easy to start. Similar to what we talked about up here, it'll get clear what you need to fix and how. Like an anecdote from one of my early stages of like outreach and sales. I was doing like such high volume of calls and not getting anything back. And it was like, so I had to fit, like, it wasn't until I actually tracked everything that I realized like the problem is either the proposal I'm sending out or it's the people I'm getting on the call. And I was able to like bring in my focus, like really laser focus down on like those two problems. And it started to unstick itself at that point. But the easiest thing would have been just to be like, I need to speak to more people, or I need to improve the offer. But the offer wasn't the issue. It was how it was either the qualification or the thing, or the proposal I was sending afterwards. Fixing those things has allowed me to actually unlock more business. But if you're not aware of that funnel, it won't work. You don't know where to focus.
Right. So increase volume, track, and then identify bottlenecks.
Yeah. Increase volume. I would say,
like in that order, basically. Yeah.
Track regularly, diagnose the issues, and diagnose and address issues. And of course, in order to increase the volume, you also need to get consistent. And this is probably, like, I would say the consistency is probably the harder one than the volume, because everything is competing for your time right now.
Yeah, but to be honest, now I like starting like this morning when I fixed up the N8N automation, I actually feel for the first time like we can qualify, a couple hundred leads per day. And I checked like false positives, false negatives, and for the first time, like the pipeline is working in a way where, You can do a pre-selection on the person, like what role they are in and what industry they're in, what company size. And then the enrichment criteria that was missing, by the way, from any tool out there, like Clay, Apollo, was the qualification criteria which we needed, which I built was just like, check if there's a public pricing page. If there's a public pricing page, scrape it. Use that scrape, put that into an LLM to validate, is this a self-service business? Do they have like an offering which is reoccurring? And additionally, a score, are they in a like very competitive, like potentially churn risky field, which is an optional score. We don't use that much. But what I mean is that simple automation, it sounds very simple, took quite a while to get going. Now runs 600 leads qualifications per day for pennies. And now we can put an actual list in of like 15,000 followers of Wes Bush and say, okay, we won't spam his followers. We will check who is actually working at a company who might have a churn problem and is a subscription business that could use our product. So finally, I feel like that part we can get going.
Yeah.
So I can report back next time.
Really interesting to hear how that goes next time, because I think like once you get going with volume, like it's the first time, like you can crack a product and still not be able to crack the volume that's required in order to like, you have customers that really enjoy using it. From a growth perspective, I don't think people realize like how much like violent effort is put into by founders to like get the world to know about their product. There's this idea of like build it and they will come that exists with so many product thinkers, like product builders, whatever people call themselves these days. But it just, I think in so few cases, it's true. There's so few, like, I think the only one that like really stands out in my mind or the only stories that really stand out in my mind of like companies like truly going viral and then using that success to like launch pad into a real product are like Airbnb and Facebook. Beyond that,
it's been a while.
Yeah. Beyond that, it's like the story's the same. It's like they had a good product and then they went absolutely ham with advertising it. Even the ones who had viral success went ham advertising it. But it's just such a crowded marketplace now. It's so much more noisy that you have to spend the time.
Yeah, I get pretty emotional about it. I mean, you do as long as you do it, right? This is my first time founding a SaaS and I've only done services business before and obviously worked on many SaaS businesses, but I haven't had to like 0 to 1 them. Worked at early stage, but there was like a machine there already to some degree. It's just seeing that even people who are really, really excited about working with us are just bombarded with other stuff, right? Everything is grabbing their attention. And to be honest, it's the same for me, right? I'm being bombarded with people that are targeting early stage founders and I don't get back to everybody like quickly, right? So it's the exact same thing. Yeah.
No, it's like, you have to develop quite a thick skin in it as well, because, what you described is like a really important observation that many people don't think about. They're not responding to you because they don't want what you want. They're not responding to you because they're too busy to remember. Like, one of the things that when I'm talking to people about like DMing, for example, not Dungeon Master, I mean, direct messages, like just sending a reminder if you don't hear back from someone, just like, hey, did you get a chance to look at this? Like that makes some people's skin crawl. The idea of like double messaging someone, like, and you can do like 3, 5, 7. I think one of the biggest like realizations for me when I first started doing this type of work, like outreach, was I was getting coached by a fella called Patrick, and he was like, oh yeah, like 75% of my revenue comes from like people that I've reminded 4 to 8 times. And I was like, oh, right. Like, he's like, yeah. So like the majority of his revenue was coming from people who he'd re-engaged like between 4 and 8 times. It's just, because it's not that they're not responding to you because they're too busy. Because they're not interested. They're not responding because they are too busy, not because they're not interested. And they'll tell you if they're not interested. You're muted.
That is probably the best argument to give somebody who hasn't grokked this yet. And by the way, I'm not saying like I'm over this. I'm not sending up 8 follow-ups like nonchalantly. Like I'm better than before. But I think the the biggest counter argument to like, no, don't do this. They will tell you if they don't want to, right? Like they will tell you if they don't like the product, if there's no reason they should read your stuff or engage with you, then they will let you know.
Yeah. And I mean, you can do it in any way that you want, right? So like, I re-engage people when they re-engage with me, not through a DM, but through content. So when I'm working through DMs, if I haven't spoken to someone in like 6 weeks or 8 weeks and they're qualified and then they engage with my post, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm back in. Like, and then I might even do a re-offer or change the way that I speak to them. And I think like if you can just get into the habit of like, not every lapsed lead is a lost lead. And figuring out like how to judge, like, do I let this person lapse or pester them because I'm convinced there's a sale here? All of these things are just like stuff that you learn just by doing it for an unreasonable amount of time. You know, people think like, oh, I messaged 1,000 people and I didn't make any sales. And it's like, I didn't make my first sale on LinkedIn until I reached out to like 2,500 people. Yeah. So it's
a game,
yeah.
I think. And I think because I think this sounds like dreadful to some degree but real. It's also the part that excites me like a lot about Q1 and the next year is that prior to this, I was in the game of like, okay, how do we combine our skill set as a founder team, the domain experience that we have, the insights that we have from the market, the capabilities we have technically, design-wise, etc., to a point where we can provide value to the market, right? I think a lot of founder talk is extremely self-centered, which is understandable because you're doing something very hard. But I just realized as soon as I think that way, it usually makes me execute worse. So I'm just thinking like, I just try to stay in that frame of mind where it's like, okay, where can we provide value with our skill set, right? Like I can't build self-driving cars and deploy them in Denmark. I'm sorry, like can't do that for you right now.
Yeah.
So what can I provide? What can we provide as a team to the market that is good? And doing like great cancel flows is something tiny. It's something in the grand scheme of things. It can still be a great business. It's something that I know quite a lot about because I worked on SaaS businesses for 10 years and blah, 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 right? And so that was like figuring out that wedge of like, where do we naturally fit? Now, this might not be the final product. There might be a pivot, whatever. I don't know. But that's a natural wedge for us that feels like, I think you called it like opportunity selection or something. I think that feels right. And now I'm excited about like this more, better, different, right? I think that's like the volume game is something to learn. And that's the positive part about it is like, like you could turn a corner and you think, okay, you figured a bunch of stuff out now. And then there's just like this humbling little slap, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you thought all these very hard things you did and figured out were all there is. And then you turn a corner and you're like, there's this massive thing called cold outreach, called growth, called following up 4 times, called like embracing the cringe or whatever, like content creation, right? And no, it's not just quantity, it's also quality, right? Like the quantity also needs to be good.
Yeah.
And you turn that corner and you're like, okay, that's a whole new job to learn, basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's quantity and then quality, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's my take. You do the quantity first to find out what people are responding to, and then you increase the quality of it. Rather than doing quantity and quality, then you'll just burn yourself out doing content nobody cares about. Like, I could have agonized over editing these videos and getting like a super slick setup for you and me and, let's, make sure that we have all these things. But like, until I know that people are actually like tuning in and they want it, like it would have just been wasted effort. Like, if 100 people are interested in this, and they get decent watch time, and then I can increase the quality of it. Like, I can go deeper on it. I can do better visuals and I can do better editing and those sorts of things. But quantity is the first step. Don't kill yourself on quality because not enough people are paying attention yet. Yeah. But I think that's a pretty good place to sort of start wrapping up for today. It sounds like, I guess we'll speak again in January, back end of January, to give you a little chance to rest over the holidays. And if you're doing a push, I suppose that the things will slow down a little bit in the next few weeks. So a few weeks until we do the next one, I guess. But yeah, I think getting this system in place so that you can be consistent and do high volume is the key for the next thing. And then we'll pick up from there and hear what's going on, and then maybe dive into some more of the economics of the business to fill out our canvas that we started last time in the next session. But
Nice.
yeah, thanks for taking the time again. Thanks for sharing in building in public. And for anyone listening who made it this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to do the YouTube things like comment and subscribe and all that. And yeah, Niko, I'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much. This was super valuable. I'm going to implement a bunch of things, and we're going to come back in January and share the results. And if anybody's interested in me sharing like particulars, like the N8N enrichment workflow, the product itself, like whatever, we can introduce this here, right? Like this is an experiment in motion. So happy to do any of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Comments down below what you want to see more of this if you've made it this far. Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah, definitely respect. That's like an hour and 15 minutes. Cool. Thanks, Niko. Bye, everyone.
See you in the next one.